Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Small Steps, Big Potential, Utah's Sustainable Procurement Progress Cronin Awards Finalist Project. Thank you for spending time with us today. We are glad you're here. This is the first webinar in our 2024 Cronin Awards webinar series, but be sure to check out our upcoming webinars. On Wednesday, January 24th, join us for looking at Keeping It Consistent, Arizona's Procurement Determinations Library. And then join us Wednesday, February 14th taking a look at Taking IT to the Next Level, Michigan's Professional Development for IT Procurement. Registration is open for those and all the webinars in the series. Visit www.naspo.org to register and look for the webinars tab in the center of the page. We look forward to seeing you there. At the close of today's presentation, you'll be asked to complete a very brief questionnaire. Your feedback is very valuable to us here at NASPO. Today's presentation is good for one contact hour. To get your certificate, simply complete the questionnaire following the presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to explain the format of today's webinar. All attendees are muted, and you can enter comments and questions in the chat box. If you would like to ask our presenter a question, you can type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your window. Questions will be addressed during a Q&A session after the presentation. All right. I am very pleased to introduce our speakers today. We are honored to have with us Michelle Brown, a Utah native. She attends the University of Utah to achieve a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Studies and Sustainability and a Professional Master of Science and Technology degree in Environmental Science with an emphasis in public health. She worked as the environmental coordinator at Utah's Hogle Zoo for 3 years before beginning her current position as the coordinator of resource stewardship for the state of Utah in 2017. As a coordinator of resource stewardship, she works alongside state agencies to further promote partnerships and relationships both within and outside state government to develop air quality best practices for the state of Utah. Okay. And we also have with us Wendy Apirath. Wendy is the Chief Procurement Officer and Director for the State of Utah's Division of Purchasing and General Services and a graduate of Westminster College. She previously served as an assistant director in the division, where she had oversight for the state's contracts program, along with serving as project manager for the division's special projects. Before joining the state of Utah, Wendy worked in the biomedical technology industry, where she established a supply chain regulatory compliance program and developed a supplier management program in addition to strategic sourcing. In her free time, Wendy enjoys cheering at her kids' sporting events, scrapbooking, and planning home improvement projects. NASPO is grateful to have both of you here with us. So now I'm going to turn it over to you, Wendy and Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kinsey. You take such good care of us. Good afternoon, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to get to meet with all of you today. Give me 1 second while I go ahead and share my screen. Kinsey, can you just give me the okay that you can see that all right? All right. Hey, so thank you so much for the introduction. Oh, there we go. I will skip past this slide because Kinsey already did such a nice job for us. All right, so again, thank you so much to NASPO for letting us join you all today. We are going to talk about Utah's journey of sustainable procurement. And how I like to think about this is that we're about to go on a road trip together and learn together. So, of course, anytime that you're going to go on a road trip, you need a really good travel buddy. And I'm usually fortunate I get to go on this journey with Wendy all the time. But today we're also going to have a new travel partner with us, Mr. Ron Swanson. Hopefully we have some Parks and Recreation fans in the audience today. So everyone say hi to Ron. All right, let me tell you a little bit about Ron's situation. So Ron has found out that his hometown of Pawnee has set some new sustainability goals. And in order to meet those goals, sustainable procurement practices are going to be necessary. But I'm sure either you've been in this boat or you have a coworker that's in this boat where you don't always have the time to be up on the latest and greatest quote trends, and sometimes sustainability is seen as like popular culture. So he really doesn't quite know where to start. But fortunately, he knows you, and he knows that you are an expert in the area and that he has come to you for help. So before I dive too deep into things, I just wanted to give you guys an idea of the scope of the state of Utah purchasing. So the Utah Division of Purchasing manages over 1,000 cooperative contracts for goods and services used by agencies, local governments, and educational entities across the state. And they also have a spend of nearly $1 billion annually through state price agreements and cooperative contracts. And as I'm sure many of you, since you're all procurement professionals on this call today, are aware, but cooperative contracting really brings together buying power of government entities, resulting in lower prices through volume discounts, higher quality goods and services, and stronger contract terms and conditions. So how on earth did Utah even start going down this road? Basically, in a nutshell, we got asked to review a technology that we didn't understand. So we had put out an RFP for a building generator. And this was several years ago, 3-ish years ago, I think. And we had a vendor respond to the RFP with a new technology, and they claimed that it was like this amazing new renewable technology. It was cutting edge. And we had no staff or partners on like the RFP committee that could kind of justify that technology, that understood it enough to be able to grade it appropriately. So unfortunately, we couldn't accept their proposal, which is just a really bad spot for procurement to be in. And so we started to ask the question of who do we know that can help us answer these questions, because it's such a rapidly growing field. And at the time, the then director of purchasing knew that I did a lot of air quality stuff. And he's like, well, I think she does some sustainability stuff. I think that's under air quality. And he approached me and we started having these conversations. And that's really how the whole thing got started. So when Wendy and I were getting ready for today's presentation, we really wanted to highlight that when you go to start a sustainable procurement program, it is not this grandiose proposal. It can be as simple as asking a question or having a conversation. So that's how Utah got started. But I'm assuming that a lot of the folks here today are familiar with what sustainable procurement is, but I always like to go over the basics because it never hurts, right? So there's kind of 3 pillars to sustainable procurement. There's the environmental pillar, economic, and social. And a really strong program is kind of balances all 3 of these at the same time. And I always like to think about it in terms as like for a state employee, I am trying to be the best steward I can for present and future generations and for the state that I'm representing. So I want to make sure that Utah keeps being one of the best states in the nation. Now, there's a lot of common misconceptions when you talk about sustainable procurement. Some of the most common ones are that it's all like there's not 3 pillars, there's just the one, it's just environmental. That it's expensive to implement and that it's excessively regulated. We'll kind of go into answers about how those are, in fact, misconceptions a little later on. But another thing that I want to talk to you about is that sustainable procurement can really look different for like a vendor and a purchasing agent. So for a vendor, sustainable procurement can look like identifying suppliers who are low impact, fair trade, or environmentally friendly. Maybe they're trying to find products that or vendors that are using production materials that have been sourced responsibly. Whereas for a procurement agent, it can look like asking the vendor questions about sustainability, like such as, do they have sustainable products or services? Are those products certified by a third party? We'll talk about third-party certifications later in this presentation today. Are there sustainable alternatives or services available in the market? Like I said, this is a quickly growing field, but maybe, you know, the product or service you're currently looking for hasn't really had like a sustainability lens put to it yet. And really think about what all is included in this space. And when I say what's included in sustainable procurement, it's basically everything. Pretty much anything. I mean, anything that can improve less transportation, less raw material consumptions, lower energy and reduced waste can fall under that sustainable procurement umbrella, as it were. The other thing that for those of you that work in government, you can also put it to this lens of how can we be better stewards of taxpayer dollars. So sustainable procurement practices result in brand value, and that does matter for governments as well as private industry. And I was doing a little bit of research before our presentation today, and 90% of studies show that effective sustainability standards lower the cost of capital for companies. That was a study done by Oxford. And then another tidbit I found was sustainable procurement practices can reduce procurement costs by 9 to 16%. And that was done by the World Economic Forum. So there's some actual evidence out there of how this kind of a program can be beneficial to your institution. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about how we got really connected with a lot of community partners, but one of the first partners I want to call out is Dr. Nicole Darnall. She's with Arizona State University, and she gave a presentation for us a few years ago. And this is one of the slides from her presentation. And the reason I love to always lead out in conversations about sustainable procurement with this is because I want you guys to know how important you are to the environmental goals of your institution. So government purchases, as you can read here, have a carbon footprint 9 times that of buildings and vehicle fleets. So if your institution is trying to figure out how to reduce their emissions, you are a critical part for that becoming a success story. Here in Utah, we have a big focus on improving Utah's air quality, and purchasing has been one of my greatest advocates. And like I said, they're critical for us being successful. And when Wendy and I were talking about these slides, the other thing we want to make sure you understand is you may facilitate the process and you might not be the end decision maker, but you can aid in the final decision and bring sustainability into the conversation, again, just by asking the question about sustainability in any of your daily processes. Okay, so this is another slide from Dr. Nicole Darnall. And I just really like, because again, it kind of gives you like that step back overview of what sustainable purchasing programs, that's SPP, kind of have. So like direct impacts of product use. So obviously you have supply emissions are 5.5 times greater than an organization's direct operations. And 40% of global emissions are driven from organizations through their purchases. Okay. And then kind of like these indirect supply chain impacts that you make by implementing more sustainability, you're encouraging greater production of sustainable products, you're influencing global supply chains, and you're redirecting consumer markets. Okay. So obviously we're on a road trip, right, together. So I am going to be making pit stops throughout my presentation. So if you don't have it already, grab like a piece of paper and a pen, or just take some digital notes. But I just want you to take a minute when we take these pit stops and see if you can answer some of these questions. So this is going to be your opportunity to brainstorm while the information is fresh. So I want you to ask yourself, why are you implementing sustainable procurement? Basically, why did you hop on this webinar today? And then what are you hoping to achieve with your sustainable procurement program? And I'll give you guys just like a couple of seconds to jot down an answer to those questions. Okay. We'll keep going, but again, kind of keep these ideas at the forefront of your minds as we continue chatting together, all right? Okay, so, let's see. Okay. So when we are talking about getting started, with your sustainable procurement program, I want you to know that you're not starting from scratch. So very frequently, your institution already has lots of data available to itself. You're already probably running a lot of those reports. And much of that data you're already pulling could easily help you establish that baselines to a sustainable procurement practice. So I'm going to go over just a couple of the tools that the state of Utah has utilized over these last few years to kind of give you hopefully like a spark or an idea of what you could utilize. So one of the first ones is we partnered with Amazon Business and we developed an Amazon dashboard in fiscal year 2022 and basically allowed us to track all of our climate pledge friendly products that were purchased. Now, if you're not familiar with what climate pledge friendly actually is, it's a program of Amazon's which highlights products that are certified by one of the sustainability certifications featured on Amazon's certification page or by Amazon's own Compact by Design certification. Now, when we first started using this dashboard for fiscal year 2022, we found out that only 1% of our purchases were actually climate pledge friendly. And the first time I presented this to NASPO, Wendy was like, well, we need to be sure that we include that. And I was like, Wendy, it's only 1%. I don't know why we would want to market that. But she was totally right. The reason that it's so important is because when you get this data, then you actually know where you're starting from. So for us, hey, it's 1%, but now we know that it's 1%. We have nowhere to go but up. And it makes any of the additional programs that you implement afterward measurable to see what's successful and what's not. So what we actually came to find out is that most of our users or procurement agents didn't even know that climate pledge friendly was an option on Amazon and they didn't even know how to search for it. So again, like don't be discouraged if some of your first quote wins are smaller. You are still moving forward, and that's the point. So another Utah tool that we have is the Think Utah Quote Local tool. And essentially, this is like a quote local search engine. So a user can filter by the county, the city, the zip code, or an industry. And in fact, I took a little screenshot here for you so you could take a peek at it. And this link as well, I think these slides are shared. You can also directly go to the Think Utah Quote Local too from that link. But again, very simple, right? Very clean. You've got your different drop downs. And as you can see kind of at the bottom of this image, you've got the business name, the address, the city, the phone, the industry, and the number of employees. And I kind of wanted to explain, why does buying local matter? Like, why are we using this as an example? So actually the state of Maryland, their Department of Environment is what theirs is called, says that buying food and goods transported out of state generally requires more energy and sourcing than sourcing these items locally. The farther away our food and products come from, the more fuel that must be used to get it where it needs to go. Okay, that makes sense, right? We've heard that before. But another one that I thought was kind of interesting was from energy.gov. Buying locally means reducing fuel costs and greenhouse gas emissions that result from non-locally grown food being transported from distant locations. American food travels an average of 1,500 to 2,500 miles from farm to table, according to the World Watch Institute. I had no idea that my apple for lunch had to go that far. And then just like one other tidbit from Michigan State University is local businesses are owned by people who live in the community, are less likely to leave, and are more invested in the community's future. Shopping at local businesses creates more local jobs. Now, I want to be really clear on this website. We are not doing preference for local. This is just another tool to educate our users that there are local vendors available and they can find them for themselves using this tool easier. One other kind of unanticipated win with our Think Utah Quote Local tool is that a lot of our legislators like that the tool is out there because they found out like, oh, now I can like see the vendors of, in my constituency and they like that. So sometimes like there's these, I don't know what you call it, like tertiary benefits that pop up from your program. So definitely look for those as well. All right, so you heard me mention it a few times about third-party certifications. So third-party certifications, they're optional, but in case you're not familiar with what they are, it basically means that an independent organization has reviewed the manufacturing process of a product and has independently determined that the final product complies with specific standards for safety, quality, performance, or in these cases, sustainability standards. Sometimes third-party certifications are also called eco-labels. But I want to make a couple of things like really clear when you start playing with third-party certifications. They vary in strength and thoroughness and the level of verification. So not all certifications are complete without considering other attributes. Some of these are single attribute certifications and are based on only one criteria, like energy efficiency, for example. And then you have multi-attribute certifications, which verify multiple things about the product or the service. So we are currently at the state of Utah utilizing third-party certifications. I'll talk about our internship program later on in the presentation, but our interns are looking at all of our current state cooperative contracts and looking for different sustainability features. And one of the things that they're looking for is if there's the product or service has been third-party certified at all. So it has been beneficial for us. Now, I do want to just give you guys a couple of examples of what these third-party certifications mean. So again, this is a really big umbrella. So there's third-party certifications for lots of things in sustainability. So like there's cleaning chemicals and services. You guys might see in the right-hand corner of this slide, there's the EPA Safer Choice. So Safer Choice, for example, helps consumers, businesses, and purchasers find products that contain ingredients that are safer for human health and environment and perform at or above the same standard as other products. You can also go with electronic products. So kind of, what would you say? Second row down, third one over, there's like the little EPEAT check mark. So EPEAT actually stands for Electronic Products Environmental Assessment Tool. And this is a global rating system for sustainable electronics. And EPEAT currently includes categories for like PCs, displays, televisions, imaging equipment like printers, copiers, scanners, and even mobile phones. And EPEAT has an online registry which lists sustainable products from many different manufacturers. So like this is work that's already been done, so you might as well utilize it to make the implementation of your program a little bit easier. So I want to highlight when we're talking about third-party certifications, another benefit sometimes is that it also helps you avoid greenwashing. So sustainability as a whole has been increased in demand from the community. And of course, whenever that happens, other folks are hoping to sell additional products or services by appearing to be sustainable. And greenwashing is the term where it's basically the practice when you make an unsubstantiated or misleading claim about environmental benefits of a product, service, technology, or company practice. And the reason I put this image here is it kind of checks off a couple of boxes. So you have a known brand and they rebranded for this line of the soda. And as you can see, it's a green can. They kind of have typically like kind of like a freestyle font, right? Light and lively. And then you can probably barely see, but in the right-hand side, kind of above the F, there's these little leaves as well. And honestly, greenwashing is that simple. So they're hoping if they add the color green and they have some leaves on it, the consumer will naturally assume that this product is more sustainable than a product without those features. And so being aware of greenwashing as a procurement professional can kind of help you avoid some of those pitfalls. So just always be aware of that. And again, that's where those third-party certifications can be really beneficial for you. Okay. So another thing we really knew had to happen for our program to be successful long-term was for us to create a spark. Like, how do we keep this sustainability conversation alive? For us, for the last 2 years, we actually hosted a sustainable purchasing summit. And this summit was given to Utah's procurement professionals, and they came from higher education, local governments, and more. And I will tell you what, we had speakers come from all over the place. We had Arizona State University come and talk about their sustainable purchasing research initiative. We had legislators from the Utah legislature come and present on how they felt like sustainable procurement could impact some of their legislative goals. We have a group called the Utah Sustainable Business Coalition. That's the Utah SBC you see on the screen there. And that's a group of private companies that get together to share best practice ideas on their own sustainable procurement. So obviously private industry is very different from government, but we work closely with them to see if there's anything that we can mirror as well. We even had our Division of Facilities Construction and Management join us because they do all of our energy efficiency work in the state. And so maybe there's ways that we could have different products or services available on state contract that could help them better reach their goals. We even had Utah Cryptocurrency Task Force, the chair of that group, present at one of ours because we started having the question of, well, Utah, our governor last year, I think, said that he wanted Utah state government to accept cryptocurrency. And the environmental impacts of cryptocurrency is still being widely discussed. And we're like, well, what is that going to look like for purchasing? And so it's this really great open space for some of these conversations to happen that might not happen organically otherwise. One other one that we kind of unexpected was for an entire other program within our department, we were doing these lunch and learns, and it was kind of a way to increase collaboration among our employees. But I would host them, and they were just kind of like these sustainability related discussions. So I would have these experts in a lot of different fields like Utah bees or the Great Salt Lake or Utah sustainable tourism or international dark skies. I didn't know until I started having these lunch and learns that Utah is like some of the most dark sky spaces in the country. And so we would do these informal lunch and learns, but what I wasn't expecting was that folks got really excited about talking about this space. And then when they went back to like their daily routine of work, they started talking about sustainability so much more just from having a few of these informal conversations and just kind of being, I don't know, introduced to the space really. So this next slide is just to show you kind of what our sustainable purchasing summit looked like. Again, sometimes if you can find the support system to just try some things, it's gonna be worth it. And our sustainable purchasing summit has evolved over the years too. So like our first 2 years, we had one summit, and that was all you talked about was sustainable purchasing for like that meeting. And then as we kind of, got feedback and kind of had some more internal conversations, we're like, this is great to have like this one big event, but we almost need to keep it at the forefront of everyone's mind. So I feel like we need to have like, instead of one whole day, like 30-minute presentations throughout the year so that people don't forget to like have this as part of their routine. So just know that things change. Like we are constantly learning ourselves and working to make it the best program we can. So you've heard me talk for for a little bit here. Let's take another pit stop. Ask yourself a couple of questions. Could third-party certifications help you? How can you create a spark at work for sustainable purchasing? And then what speakers would you want to hear from at your own summit? And I'll give you guys just a few seconds to think about that. Okay, let's keep going because I know we're on the clock. All right, so I'll have Wendy take this next slide, but we just want to make a couple of clarifications when we're talking about preference versus education. There you go.
Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm sure Kenzie will tell me if not, but preference versus education. So one of the big things that we talk about here is that the state of Utah actually does not have preference laws. We all know that there are requirements in different states and different statutes and ordinances that have, you know, small business requirements or diverse supplier requirements or, you know, sustainability related preferences. We don't have that, and there's no intent, knock on wood, as our session is opening next week, that there's not going to be a change to that, because we see that there's a potential to limit the ability of our Utah vendors from growing beyond the state of Utah if we do put in some of those just based on reciprocity laws. But because there is no preference, one of the big things that we've shifted to is actually focusing on the education of it. Because just because it's not a preference doesn't mean, back to what something Michelle said earlier, is that doesn't mean we can't ask the question, right? We can always ask the question about sustainability. And it's one of those things where we can look for the opportunities to educate those agencies that we're partnered with, that are looking for you know, different products in technologies and services and, you know, and commodities, and just help them to remember to ask the question. Because even if it's not scored, even if it isn't something that could overall be part of their thinking and solution basis, it could still be something that opens that door to something, you know, to a sustainable solution that's going to be really beneficial in the long run. And opening that conversation is really where we need to start. So that way they become familiar with the language that's part of that. You know, it's not just green. It's not just environmental. There's a bigger picture here. And then they can start to see what's available in the different marketplaces of industries.
Thanks, Wendy. So before we switch off this slide, I just have to tell you how much I love this image where he's like, not to worry, I have a permit. It says, this just says I can do what I want. I wish I had that permit. I want to be able to do whatever
I think purchasing folks hear that a lot about people wishing that they could just do what they want.
Okay. So you kind of heard me just briefly touch on it earlier, but to have a really successful program, definitely look for your advocates and look broadly. When we started talking about our sustainable procurement program, like I said, I go to a lot of experts in various fields, and it's amazing at how much different professionals actually want to help you with their program. Like, they like being asked about what they are so well versed in. Folks that do a lot of air quality goals for state government, sustainable purchasing overlaps that really well. So talk to like your air quality divisions, or talk to like your various environmental departments. And like I said, I'm kind of like this weird position in the state where I'm like the coordinator of resource stewardship, and resource stewardship kind of means sustainability, but we don't say sustainability. And so sometimes it can be kind of hard to find your person, but you can do it, just look broadly. I mentioned our Division of Facilities Construction and Management. They do a lot of work in water conservation. Maybe our contracts can help with those initiatives. Never overlook the people that just have personal passions for sustainability. There's quite a few of them out there, and they want to kind of channel that energy somewhere. See if they can help you with your program. This is gonna, at the end of the day, this is gonna be your support crew to help you find some success. So we're gonna take another quick pit stop. I want you to just take a second and think about, what advocates do you have? Who do you know that's already working in this space? And if I could hear all of your mics, I would hope I would hear some scribbling noise right now, because someone that is talking to you right now could be listed on your sheet, right? State of Utah is working on this. So Michelle Brown could be on your list. Wendy Apirath could be on that list. But think just for a second of who else you could reach out to. Okay, let's get going. Okay, so one thing I've learned from Wendy is never shy away from a pilot program. Pilot programs can be so beneficial for anything you do, honestly. I wanted to talk about one that we actually ran here in Utah. And again, just to show you that sometimes things that seem separate end up overlapping with each other. So our Division of Facilities and Construction Management was approached by a legislator of, why aren't we utilizing electric lawn equipment at state facilities? And this is a new technology that our grounds crews weren't familiar with. And so I was asked to run a pilot program. Like, can this equipment, kind of do the job, as it were? So I was really fortunate, and I was able to find funding from our Utah Department of Environmental Quality. And we ran the pilot, and it ended up being really successful. We had mostly positive feedback. Our DFCM crews found that they had less maintenance costs. And what was particularly interesting from the pilot was I found out how much of our hurdle was preconceived notions of technology. So I had some lawn crews that the crew that actually worked on the lawns at our Department of Environmental Quality had nothing but the best things to say about all of the equipment, because they were helping the mission of DEQ. And I was like, wow, that is so cool. That's amazing. Then we had a different lawn crew in rural Utah that was like, this is so dumb. I don't like the equipment. Why? But it's the same equipment. So where was the gap? I found out the gap was me in not having done a good enough job of explaining the why. Why are we doing this? Why does this matter? And how their role of utilizing the equipment was helping Utah achieve these other goals. So you can learn those things with the pilot program, because now our Utah Department of Environmental Quality is actually making that. It's actually out for public comment right now, but they're actually making that a rule. So all of state government, including like our counties and cities, would have to fall under this. Eventually private citizens and private businesses. This air quality rule would state that folks can't use a 2-stroke engine on bad air quality days. And unfortunately here in Utah, they're pretty frequent. So either they could use, low or no emission equipment, or they can't do it at all. Well, that's going to have a lot of impact on a lot of folks. And since we already did this pilot, our state agents, like our state lawn folks, are ready to go. Like, they already have the equipment. They've now experienced it. They've utilized it. So that's fine. But now the next conversation I'm having with purchasing is, do we have enough contracts already in place for this next year or 2 years down the road, when people are going to need to purchase more electric lawn equipment? But at least now we can be in front of the wave, instead of always having to kind of do a panic response. So we'll just briefly say we've done a lot of sustainable contracts. These are just a few examples of a few that we've done already. So electric buses, solar panels, electric vehicle charging equipment, cleaning products are just a few of them. So we keep getting more, like I just helped another procurement agent a couple months ago, review if there were any sustainability features in, I think it was like our food utensil contract and sodas. And there were, but at least we asked the question. So I just need to give a shout out to our interns. We just started doing or revamping really our sustainable, well, the new one is sustainable procurement interns. There have been procurement interns in the past, but basically our interns have been reviewing all of our cooperative contracts, like I mentioned earlier, seeing where third-party certifications really fit in. They've been researching best practices for us. And it's really a great benefit for the intern as well, because this sustainable procurement program at the state of Utah is so linked with the community and partnership development. It's a great networking opportunity for these interns that aren't totally sure yet, like where they want to go, but then they can meet all these people that do all these cool things and kind of see what particularly sparks their interest. And another space that we're even looking at is, I am not well versed in artificial intelligence or AI, but one of our interns is. And so like, we're even having her look at like, you know, is there a spot for AI in sustainable procurement? And she's helping us answer that question. I do just want to briefly call out this image on this slide. Underneath the green arrow was our first purchasing intern, and the gentleman under the blue arrow is actually with our Utah Division of Facilities Construction and Management. And all of these other folks in the photo are actually with our University of Utah Industrial Assessment something center. And the reason it's cool is they are inside of the state capitol building and they are looking at energy efficiency of the space. And so we were there to see like, are there products or services that like maybe DFCM needs to utilize? Are there new practices that we're not even aware of, like new technologies or anything like that? So here in this picture, you have folks from purchasing and DFCM and higher education all working together kind of like for this main goal. And so that's what I'm saying is don't just stick within one particular group of folks. Broaden that net, because your support system will be so much bigger. So I'm going to hand it off to Wendy. We're going to talk about one of the bigger road bumps that we've had with our sustainable procurement program at the state and how we've kind of worked around it.
So just a side note on the internship program, that is partially funded by the fabulous NASPO intern grant. So if you did not participate in this last year's application, this is just my plug for it, because we've had awesome experiences with it. And the NASPO team's been great and supportive. And there have been some really great students that we've been able to work with through that. But for those of you asking, okay, what's the road bump? Well, I'm sure you all know the road bump would be legislation. And our biggest piece that has really impacted the way that we approach this and the way that we talk about sustainability and sustainable procurement within Utah is directly tied to a specific bill that we had come through this past general session that passed during the 2023 general session. And it was very, very much directed at ESG and the environmental and social and governance policies that the private sector are putting into place in some of their organizations. Now, a separate tie into that is that the state of Utah a few years ago actually had actually done a anti-Israeli boycott law, and we approached the ESG bill because it actually got shifted from just calling it that to being called an economic boycott law. So this was a bill that was intended to prohibit a public entity within the state from contracting with any company that engaged in very specific economic boycotts. In other words, not using a company, you can't use the company if the company says they're not going to support X, right? And that is anything that goes, and it was anything basically that goes above and beyond what the state and federal requirements were. So as we're talking about sustainability, probably the easiest solution is something like, the carbon footprint and emissions. Are they boycotting anybody that's not going to be supporting that? Well, Utah is an agriculture and mining state, and that's something that is a huge, concern for a lot of the folks here. So we do keep an eye on that. I mean, you've heard Michelle talk about the air quality. It's a big deal for us. But how do we approach this when we have this legislation coming at us, right? So we went through and luckily one of the things that we have is a great relationship with our executive branch partners, our executive branch agencies that state purchasing supports. We try to be as proactive as possible to help them out, whether it's through procurement or if they have contract questions or, and just be available as a resource. And what that's really allowed us to do is have a bigger say in a lot of things that they may not have otherwise contacted us for. So as soon as this bill was on the table and being drafted, and before it was actually even released, I did get a phone call from the treasurer's office. They were part of the key agencies that were really sponsoring this. And he wanted me to review through the language. The first piece here is making sure that you're watching for this legislation and being active in reaching out to whoever is the sponsor for these bills, because it may just be a conversation, right? The original language in the bill was very heavy-handed and was very, very clear that there was going to be, termination of contracts and whatnot tied into it, based off of some of this language. And sometimes you have to help those that draft our laws to better understand the overarching impact, right? We want to be able to support the best intent of the state. What is in the best, what's in the best interest of the state and of the citizens, but we also want to make sure that it's something that can be monitored and it can be maintained, and we're paying attention to that. So through some very, very heavy work with a lot of different agencies, we were able to shift the language from everything is a shall and must be done and things that could very much get us into some contract litigation problems to here's some options of what may occur as a consequence of a company participating in economic boycott. So that really helped us around educating vendors. And then when we talk about some of this economic boycott, you're probably saying, okay, what are you even talking about? It's basically saying a company is not contracting with another company because the second company doesn't meet the first company's, ESG policies. So for example, if Michelle decided that she was anti-farming because she's anti-farming, and then I chose to not work with her because she is anti-farming and that doesn't meet my ESG rules, then that would be an economic boycott because that's an economic impact, right? So what's listed in that boycotted company blue bullet underneath there is actually some of the language directly from the bill. So it does call out really specific issues that are tied into a lot of the state of Utah's policies. And those are very particularly the ones that are called out within that economic boycott. Now, there's always an exception to every rule, every law, right? So where does this not apply? Anything less than $100,000. any contractor who has less than 10,000, oh, yeah, we can go back. Somebody just asked if you go back to last slide, but I can still keep talking. This also doesn't apply if a contractor has less than 10 employees, because it may just not be feasible for them. And then if there is, and these slides, I believe, Kinsey, they will be shared, right? So I think if you miss anything, I think you'll be able to go through and download this as well. But, and then the other piece here is, if there is no economically practical alternative to what is available, and they must contract, that you know, or if it's related to the acquiring or disposing of the goods and services, or debt obligations or investment funds, then there's exceptions here, because there are some times where it's just not going to make sense. Right? We still, at the end of the day, must be good stewards of the public funding that we are charged with. Okay, we're gonna flip back to where we are right there. So what did we do to say, hey, where's our meat in the middle, and how can we be proactive in our approach to this? So we added some boilerplate language within our solicitations. So every procurement asks the vendors to attest to compliance with this statute. We provide a link to the statute. We provide a summary of what the statute says. They can go through, they can review the language, and then they have to attest to being compliant with it for the duration of their contract with us. Now, one of the actions that the statute does require is, if the vendor chooses to participate in a boycott, then they have to let the public entity know in writing. So it puts all of the work and the onus back on the vendor, on the contractor, so that our office is not having to chase and verify on an ongoing basis whether or not there's one of our contractors is participating in this. We find out, which we have not had any issues with this so to date, then we can reach out to the vendor, obviously, and address it. But I am to date, knock on wood, not aware of any contracts that have been affected by this legislation yet. And then we worked with our Assistant Attorney General to update the terms and conditions of the contracts, just to make sure that this was really called out as a non-negotiable term. I mean, there's already a line in there in all of the things about complying with all state and federal laws, but this was a call out that was really important to our legislature and to a lot of the executive branch agencies, and what it allowed us to do in calling this out as a non-negotiable term, you know, met their requirements around us being proactive to align with the statute. So really, at the end of the day, I think this is a big piece of thinking about how you can continue to work within the guidelines that you're given. I know that there are a lot of states that have, well, at least a few states that have much more stringent policy than what we have in place, but you do really have to think about, how do you put a program in place that's going to survive regardless of how your administration may change? Because we did have an administration change, actually multiple. We've had, you know, a gubernatorial change. We've actually had an executive director change. So there's been a lot of different perspectives that have tied into this. And for us, in our focus on education, as opposed to mandates and kind of being heavy-handed on that side, it's been really helpful for us to continue the conversation and continue working with agencies to grow the considerations for sustainability.
Thanks, Wendy. So I'm going to kind of just breeze past a couple of this. We have some time for Q&A, but just know that this is a journey. It's not a destination. It's okay for you to start small. And the more that you share your experiences on what is and isn't working, not only are you helping yourself, but you're also helping others that are in the same boat as you. So thanks for helping Ron get back on track. he's got his support team, and he can make his sustainable procurement goals successful. And with that, we are open for questions.
Hey, awesome. Okay, so we do have one question so far, and it asks, how do you keep the sustainable purchasing conversation going, and how do you stay connected in and outside of government?
You want me to take that one?
You know what, let me start it, and then I'm gonna pass it over to Michelle here, because I talk about it on the procurement side, and I think the inside and outside of government is really Michelle can add a lot of color to that. But for state purchasing and for us as we're engaging in procurements, it's really just asking the question. It's sitting in a meeting, working with the agencies and understanding their needs and what they're trying to solve, and then asking the question to say, hey, you know, do you want to also include a category for green and sustainable products? Or do you also want to ask them if they have, you know, environmentally friendly solutions or whatnot? And it's really just asking the question so that they hear it and they really don't see it as anything different other than just one more potential boilerplate part of their procurement that could open up some opportunity for them to get some different pricing and allow for agencies to add it into their overarching strategies. Michelle?
Yeah, and in terms of keeping it alive internally and externally, internally, I have a group of like stewardship liaisons, so it's like a representative from every single state agency across Utah government. And we meet quarterly and talk about everything around like what state government can be doing to improve air quality. But it's like just telling people that you're working on it can help you a lot. Like just even having them know that somebody is working on trying to advance this can bring out some great conversations. My job naturally does a lot of work with the public and other entities. And I have been shocked at the feedback we've received once folks know that we're even working in the space, especially given that we're from Utah as well. So just have those conversations, make your stakeholder group as diverse as possible, and it should really be beneficial for you.
All right, and we have one more. As a statewide contract agent, is there a recommended contract or agency that we could use to be a good start?
I think every state has the equivalent of our Department of Environmental Quality. They may be called something different, like in Maryland, it's, I think, Department of Environment, right? But that's always a great place to start. In addition to that, an agency like Agriculture and Food actually may have some projects where there could be a little bit more sustainability focused, and whoever manages your state parks, for us, it's our Department of Natural Resources. They do so much work in conservation, but sometimes they are trying to look for some of those out of the box solutions. And a lot of times things that play into the S and the G part of that ESG piece is really helpful as well.
All right, awesome. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in, so that is going to conclude today's presentation. I really want to thank our presenters, Michelle and Wendy, for the valuable information that they've shared today and for working with us here at NASPO to bring it to you. Thank you all for attending this webinar today, and you will all receive a follow-up email containing today's slides and materials. Remember, this webinar qualifies as one contact hour for your continuing education credits. To receive your certificate, simply fill out the survey in your browser window once you've exited this webinar. This webinar has been recorded and will be available for viewing on the NASPO YouTube page in the coming days. Questions entered into the chat and Q&A boxes have been saved, and we will try to follow up by email for any ones not addressed during this presentation. Don't forget to check out the upcoming webinars and other events at naspo.org. Thanks again to our wonderful presenters, and thank you to our guests. Have a great day.